The morning sun filtered through the blinds of courtroom 7, casting long shadows across the polished wood floor. Judge Olivia Reed adjusted her black robe and took a deep breath. Monday mornings were always busy, and today's docket looked particularly full. 23 years on the bench had taught her to prepare for anything, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Reed," announced the bailiff, his voice echoing through the high-ceilinged room. Olivia nodded to the packed courtroom before taking her seat. "Good morning, everyone. You may be seated." She pulled her reading glasses from their case and began reviewing the files for the day's first case. Her eyes scanned the document, then froze on a name that sent a jolt through her body. Thomas Fuller. Her fingers tightened on the paper. It couldn't be the same Thomas. The name wasn't that uncommon after all. But as the bailiff called the case and the defendant was led in, Olivia felt the air leave her lungs. Those eyes, warm brown with a hint of gold around the pupil, she would know them anywhere. The same eyes that had laughed with her as they raced their bikes down Willow Creek Road. The same eyes that had cried with her at her father's funeral when they were just 13. Tom looked different now. His once wild curly hair was cut short and sprinkled with gray. Deep lines framed his mouth, and his shoulders carried the weight of his circumstances. But when their eyes met across the courtroom, she saw the flash of recognition, followed by shock, then something like hope. Olivia struggled to maintain her professional composure. 25 years had passed since they'd last seen each other. 25 years since that summer night when they'd promised to keep in touch despite heading to different colleges in different states. Life, as it often does, had other plans. "Your Honor?" The prosecutor's voice snapped her back to the present. "Shall we proceed?" "Yes, of course," Olivia cleared her throat. "State versus Thomas Fuller on charges of investment fraud and money laundering." The prosecutor, a sharp young woman with a no-nonsense ponytail, approached the bench. "The state is ready to proceed, Your Honor." Thomas's attorney, a gray-haired man with an expensive suit and tired eyes, stood next. "Defense is ready, Your Honor." Olivia's mind raced. The law was clear on this matter. She should recuse herself immediately. Her history with the defendant represented a clear conflict of interest. But something kept her frozen in place, trying to reconcile the boy she knew with the man now facing serious criminal charges. Thomas Fuller, accused of swindling over 30 people out of their life savings through a fake investment company. The Tom she knew had been unfailingly honest, the kind of kid who returned extra change when the shopkeeper made a mistake. Could people really change that much? "Your Honor?" Thomas's attorney repeated, brow furrowed in concern. "My apologies. The court will take a 15-minute recess." Olivia struck her gavel with more force than necessary. "Counsel, approach the bench before we break." Both attorneys came forward, confusion evident on their faces. In a low voice, Olivia said, "I need to address a potential conflict of interest. We'll resume shortly." She retreated to her chambers, closing the heavy wooden door behind her. Her heart pounded as she sank into her leather chair. The judicial code of ethics was explicit about situations like this. She had to recuse herself. There was no other option. Olivia poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands, spilling a few drops on her desk. The framed photo of her receiving her judgeship caught her eye. She'd worked so hard to get here, built her reputation on fairness and integrity. Everyone in Pine Creek County respected her judgment, trusted her to do what was right. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Her clerk, Patty, poked her head in. "Are you okay, Judge? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Olivia murmured. "Patty, I need you to pull the file on State versus Fuller. I need to review it immediately." Once alone with the file, Olivia flipped through the pages. The prosecution had built what appeared to be a solid case. Bank records showing suspicious transfers, witness statements from people who'd lost everything, promotional materials for Fuller Wealth investments promising impossible returns. But there were odd gaps, too. Why hadn't they interviewed Thomas's business partner, a man named Victor Reese? His name appeared several times in the documents, but always peripherally. And some of the witness statements contained inconsistencies that nagged at her. Olivia closed the file and stared out the window at the courthouse square below. Children played around the old bronze statue of the town founder, while their parents chatted on nearby benches. This town had been her home for the past 15 years. She'd built a life here, earned respect and trust, And now Tom was here too, in the worst possible circumstances. Memories washed over her, climbing the big oak tree behind his grandmother's house, stealing cookies from his mom's famous cookie jar, crying on his shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart at 16. Tom had been her best friend during those formative years, someone who knew her better than anyone. The intercom buzzed. "Judge, they're ready for you whenever you're set to return," Patty said. Olivia took a deep breath. "Thank you, Patty. I'll be right there." Walking back into the courtroom felt like walking through molasses. All eyes turned to her as she took her seat at the bench. Tom's eyes followed her every move, a question in them that she couldn't answer yet. "Before we proceed," Olivia began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil, "I must address a matter of judicial ethics." She looked directly at both attorneys. "I have a prior personal connection with the defendant, Mr. Fuller. We were childhood friends in another state many years ago." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor's eyebrows shot up and Thomas's attorney leaned over to whisper something to him. "In light of this connection, I will be recusing myself from this case effective immediately." Olivia struck her gavel once. "This case will be reassigned to Judge Henderson. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9. As she gathered her papers, she couldn't help but glance at Tom one last time. His expression was unreadable now, a mixture of surprise and something else. Was it relief? Disappointment? In the privacy of her chambers, Olivia made 2 phone calls. The first was to the chief judge explaining her recusal. The second was to her friend in the public defender's office. "Lisa, I need some advice," she said when her friend answered. "Hypothetically, if a judge noticed potential gaps in a prosecution's case before recusing themselves, what would be the ethical way to ensure those concerns are addressed?" Lisa's silence spoke volumes. "Liv, you know I can't answer that. You're walking a dangerous line here." "I know," Olivia sighed. "I know." That evening, Olivia sat on her porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her dog, Rusty, lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head when a car passed by. She'd done the right thing by recusing herself. That much was clear. But the nagging feeling wouldn't leave her. What if Tom was innocent? What if he was being set up? The Tom she knew would never steal from people. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She didn't know Tom anymore. People changed. Life changed them. The boy who'd shared his lunch with her every day in 5th grade when her mom forgot to pack one might not be the same person anymore. Olivia took a sip of her tea, now gone cold. Tomorrow, she would return to her courtroom and face a different case, different people with different problems. She would be fair and impartial, as she always was. But tonight, she couldn't help wondering about the road not taken, about how life had brought them back together in such an impossible way. As darkness fell, Olivia made a decision. She wouldn't interfere with the case directly. That would be unethical and potentially illegal. But she would watch it closely. And if there was a way to ensure justice was truly served without compromising her integrity, she would find it. Because sometimes doing the right thing meant more than just following the rules. Sometimes it meant listening to that small voice inside that said something wasn't adding up, and right now that voice was shouting. The next morning, Olivia woke before her alarm. She'd barely slept, tossing and turning as memories of her childhood with Tom mixed with worries about crossing ethical lines. She made her coffee stronger than usual and watched the sunrise from her kitchen window, trying to clear her head before heading to court. The courthouse was quieter than normal when she arrived. A few early birds from the clerk's office nodded as she passed. No one mentioned yesterday's recusal, but she felt their curious glances. Small-town courthouses ran on gossip, and hers was no exception. "Morning, Judge," said Bill, the security guard who'd been checking IDs at the front entrance for as long as she could remember. "Heard you had an interesting day yesterday." Olivia smiled tightly. "News travels fast. Always does." Bill's kind eyes crinkled at the corners. "For what it's worth, doing the right thing ain't always the easy thing." She nodded, grateful for the simple wisdom, and continued to her chambers. Her new docket was already on her desk. Divorce proceedings, a property dispute, and 3 minor drug possession cases. Normal, uncomplicated cases, nothing that would keep her up at night. But as she reviewed the files, her mind kept drifting to Tom. What was he doing right now? Was he back in the county jail, or had his attorney managed to post bail? She hadn't even checked the bail amount before recusing herself. A knock on her door pulled her from these thoughts. "Come in," she called, straightening the papers on her desk. Lisa from the public defender's office stepped in, closing the door behind her. "Got a minute?" "For you?" "Always." Olivia gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What brings you by so early?" Lisa sat down, her expression serious. "I heard about your recusal yesterday. Word is you knew the defendant from way back. We grew up together in the same small town. I hadn't seen him in 25 years until he walked into my courtroom." Olivia sighed. "I did what I had to do." "Of course you did." Lisa studied her friend's face. "But something's bothering you about the case, isn't it? That's why you called me yesterday." Olivia hesitated. Lisa was not only her friend, but one of the most ethical lawyers she knew. If anyone would understand her dilemma, it would be her. "There are gaps in the prosecution's case," she said finally. "Nothing concrete, just things that don't add up." "Like what?" "Like why they haven't focused on the business partner, Victor Reese. From what I saw in the file, he had equal access to the accounts, and some of the witness statements contradict each other in small but important ways." Lisa leaned forward. "Judge Henderson is fair. He'll notice these things too, will he?" Olivia rubbed her temples. "Frank Henderson is a good judge, but he's overworked and understaffed. You know how backed up his docket is. Will he take the time to really dig into this case?" "That's not your problem anymore," Lisa reminded her gently. "You did the right thing by recusing yourself. Now you have to let it go." Olivia knew her friend was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Tom needed her, not as a judge, but as someone who knew him, the real him. "I ran a search on him last night," she admitted. After college, he worked for a major financial firm in Boston. Rose through the ranks quickly. Got married, had 2 kids. Divorced 5 years ago. Moved back to the Midwest and started his own investment company with this Victor Reese character. "Olivia," Lisa's voice held a warning. I know. I'm crossing a line." She stood up and paced to the window. "But what if he's innocent, Lisa? What if I'm the only one who believes that because I'm the only one who knew him before?" Lisa joined her at the window. "If there are real issues with the prosecution's case, they'll come out during trial. That's how the system works. The system isn't perfect. We both know that." A heavy silence fell between them. Outside, the courthouse square was coming alive with the morning rush of people heading to work. "What are you planning to do?" Lisa asked finally. "Nothing illegal or unethical," Olivia assured her. "But I might talk to him. Not about the case, just to understand how he ended up here." Lisa shook her head. "That's still risky. If the prosecution found out—" "I know the risks," Olivia cut in. "But I also know I won't be able to sleep at night if I don't at least try to understand what happened." After Lisa left, Olivia tried to focus on her own cases. The morning passed in a blur of testimonies and rulings. She maintained her usual careful attention to detail, but underneath it all, thoughts of Tom lingered. During the lunch recess, she made a decision. Instead of eating in her chambers as usual, she drove to the county jail. She'd simply say she was visiting an old friend. It wasn't a lie, after all. The jail was a drab concrete building on the outskirts of town. Olivia had sentenced countless people to time here, but she rarely visited. The stark reality of incarceration was something she preferred not to witness up close. At the front desk, she flashed her ID. "I'd like to visit a pretrial detainee. Thomas Fuller." The officer looked up, surprised to see a judge in the visitor area. "Of course, Your Honor, let me check if he's available." A few minutes later, Olivia sat in a small visitation room, her heart pounding. The door opened and Tom walked in, wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Liv," he said, using the nickname only childhood friends had used. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Tom." She gestured to the chair across from her. "I thought we should talk." He sat down slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "I couldn't believe it when I saw you on the bench yesterday. Of all the courtrooms in all the towns in all the world—" "I recused myself," she said quickly. "Judge Henderson will be handling your case now." "I know." He nodded. "My lawyer explained it. You did the right thing." A silence stretched between them, 25 years long. "What happened, Tom?" she asked finally. "How did you end up here?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. "It's a long story and I've got time." Tom took a deep breath. "After college, I went into finance. Did well for myself. Had the life everyone dreams about, big house, beautiful wife, 2 great kids. Then the recession hit. My firm downsized and I got caught in the cuts. Around the same time, Beth, my wife, decided she wanted out. Said I'd changed, become obsessed with money and status. Olivia listened without interrupting, watching the pain cross his face. After the divorce, I wanted a fresh start. I moved back to the Midwest, started my own investment firm. Met Victor at a finance conference and we hit it off. He had connections, clients ready to invest. It seemed perfect. Tom's voice hardened. I didn't know he was using my reputation to run a side scheme. By the time I figured it out, it was too late. You're saying you're innocent? Olivia kept her tone neutral. I'm saying I made mistakes. I should have checked his background more thoroughly. Should have questioned why some of the numbers didn't add up. But I never stole from anyone, Liv. I would never do that. Olivia wanted desperately to believe him. The Tom she knew had been unfailingly honest. But people changed. She'd seen it happen countless times in her courtroom. Why didn't you tell your lawyer about Victor's role in all this? Tom's shoulders slumped. I have. He says it's just my word against Victor's. And Victor has documents showing I authorized everything. Documents I never signed, by the way. Forged signatures? This was new information, something she hadn't seen in the file. Yes, but proving it is another matter. The prosecution has their narrative all worked out. Greedy financial advisor scams trusting clients. It's cleaner that way, easier to prosecute. Olivia felt a chill. If what Tom was saying was true, a grave injustice was about to happen. But if he was lying, she was letting herself be manipulated by an old connection. I shouldn't be discussing your case, she said, standing up. I'm sorry, Tom, I just needed to see you, to understand. He stood too, his eyes searching hers. I understand. But Liv, for what it's worth, seeing you again was the one good thing to come out of this mess, even if it was just for a moment in your courtroom. As she walked back to her car, Olivia felt the weight of an impossible choice. The ethical path was clear. Stay away, let the justice system run its course. But the human path, the path of friendship and loyalty, pulled her in another direction. Back in her chambers, she stared at her reflection in the small mirror on the wall. The woman looking back at her had worked her entire career to uphold the law, to be fair and impartial. Could she risk all that for someone she hadn't seen in 25 years? But as she prepared for her afternoon docket, another question haunted her. Could she live with herself if she did nothing and an innocent man went to prison? She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew she wouldn't find peace until she found a way to uncover the truth, a way that wouldn't compromise everything she believed. In the courthouse halls were nearly empty when Olivia returned to her office that evening. Most of the staff had gone home hours ago, but she'd stayed late, using paperwork as an excuse to think. Her conversation with Tom kept replaying in her mind. The desperation in his eyes seemed genuine, but she'd seen plenty of convincing liars in her courtroom over the years. She locked her office door and pulled out a legal pad. If she was going to help Tom, if he truly deserved help, she needed to be smart about it. Writing Victor Reese at the top of the page, she began jotting down questions. Who was he? Where did he come from? What was his background in finance? And most importantly, where was he now? According to Tom, Victor had vanished shortly before the arrests, claiming he was visiting family overseas. Convenient timing if Tom's story was true. Olivia's computer hummed to life as she typed Victor's name into a search engine. Dozens of results appeared. LinkedIn profiles, news articles, social media accounts. She clicked on a business news article from 3 years ago. Reese and Fuller launch boutique investment firm. The photo showed Tom and a tall, distinguished-looking man with silver hair and an expensive suit, both smiling broadly at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. She dug deeper, finding Victor's impressive resume. Harvard Business School, positions at several top investment firms, charity board memberships. On paper, he looked impeccable. Maybe too impeccable. Olivia picked up her phone, hesitated, then dialed a number. Mike, it's Olivia Reed. I know it's late, but I need a favor. Mike Chen had been her best investigator when she worked as a prosecutor 15 years ago. Now retired from the police force, he ran a private investigation firm that occasionally helped her with background checks on particularly troubling cases. For you, Judge. Name it. His voice was gruff but warm. I need information on someone named Victor Reese. Discreetly. She gave him the basics. Careful not to mention Tom or the current case. Professional or personal interest? Mike asked. Let's call it personal, she said after a pause. How soon can you get me something? Give me 48 hours. I'll see what turns up. After hanging up, Olivia felt a twinge of guilt. Was she crossing a line? Probably. But she wasn't interfering with the case directly. She was just gathering information. If Victor Reese was exactly who he claimed to be, no harm done. If not, well, she'd cross that bridge when she came to it. The next morning, Olivia arrived at court earlier than usual. Judge Henderson's courtroom was on the same floor as hers, and she knew he typically reviewed his cases before court began. She found him in his chambers, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he flipped through a file. Frank, got a minute? She asked, knocking on his open door. He looked up, surprised. Olivia, come in, come in. What brings you by so early? Judge Frank Henderson was in his 60s, with a reputation for fairness but also for moving cases along quickly. After 40 years in the legal system, he'd seen it all and rarely got rattled by anything. Olivia sat across from him, choosing her words carefully. I wanted to talk to you about the Fuller case. I know I recused myself and I'm not trying to interfere, but you know the defendant personally, he finished for her. It's a tricky situation. I understand, yes, she admitted. We were close as kids. I haven't seen him in decades, but I still feel invested. Frank removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. What's on your mind, Olivia? You didn't come here just to tell me you're concerned about an old friend. I've been reviewing the case file, she said. Before I recused myself, she added quickly, seeing his expression. And I noticed the prosecution hasn't focused much on the business partner, Victor Reese. It struck me as odd. Frank leaned back in his chair. You think there's more to the story? I'm not sure, she said honestly. But in cases like this, when money goes missing, everyone with access to accounts should be thoroughly investigated. That's basic procedure. True enough. Frank tapped his fingers on the desk. The DA seems pretty confident in their case against Fuller, though. First hearing is set for tomorrow morning. Bail determination? Olivia nodded, trying to appear casual. Will you look into it? The Reese angle? Frank studied her for a long moment. You know I can't promise anything, Olivia. But I'll keep an eye out for gaps in the prosecution's case. That's my job anyway. That's all I'm asking. She stood to leave. Thanks, Frank. One more thing, he said as she reached the door. Be careful, Olivia. Your reputation is beyond reproach. Don't let an old friendship cloud your judgment. His warning followed her back to her own courtroom where a full docket awaited. Throughout the day, as she listened to testimony and made rulings, part of her mind remained fixated on Tom's case. What was Victor Reese hiding, and how could she prove it without compromising her position? That evening, as she walked to her car in the courthouse parking lot, a figure stepped out from between two vehicles. Olivia's hand went instinctively to her purse where she kept pepper spray. Judge Reed? The woman was in her 50s with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting. Can I talk to you for a minute? About Thomas Fuller. Olivia's guard went up immediately. I'm sorry, but I've recused myself from that case. I can't discuss it. Please, the woman said. My name is Nancy Winters. I invested with Fuller Wealth. Lost everything. Her voice cracked. But I don't think Mr. Fuller did it. Olivia hesitated, then gestured to a nearby bench. Once they were seated, Nancy pulled out a folder from her bag. I've been going through all my paperwork since this happened, she explained. And I found something strange. The signature on this investment authorization doesn't match the signature on my original contract with Mr. Fuller. Olivia looked at the documents. The signatures were similar but not identical. The one on the authorization form, the form that had apparently moved Nancy's money into the fraudulent accounts, was slightly different. The loops were tighter, the angle more slanted. Have you shown this to the police? Or the prosecutor? Olivia asked. Nancy nodded. They said it wasn't conclusive. That people's signatures vary, but I worked as a bank teller for 30 years, Judge Reed. I know forged signatures when I see them. Why are you coming to me with this? Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. Word gets around, Nancy said. People are saying you knew Thomas Fuller years ago, that you believe in him. She leaned forward. Is it true? Olivia chose her words carefully. I knew him as a child. People change. But even if I did believe him, I can't get involved in his case now. Then who's going to help him? Nancy's eyes filled with tears. The prosecutor doesn't care about the truth. She just wants a conviction. And my statement about the signatures didn't even make it into the official record. This got Olivia's attention. What do you mean? I gave my statement to a Detective Wilson. But when I checked later asking if they needed the original documents, they said there was no record of my statement about the signatures. Just my complaint about losing my investment. Olivia felt a chill. Evidence being ignored, or worse, suppressed, was a serious matter. Mrs. Winters, may I keep these copies? I promise I'll make sure the right people see them. Nancy handed over the folder. I have more at home, and I'm not the only one who noticed problems. There's a group of us, investors who lost money but don't believe Thomas Fuller is responsible. We've been comparing notes. Olivia's legal mind was spinning with the implications. If multiple victims had evidence suggesting forgery, and if that evidence wasn't being properly recorded. Thank you for bringing this to me, she said finally. I can't promise anything, but I'll make sure this information gets to Judge Henderson and the defense attorney. After Nancy left, Olivia sat in her car for a long time, staring at the folder on the passenger seat. The ethical line she'd been towing was getting blurrier by the minute. But now it wasn't just about helping an old friend. It was about ensuring justice was properly served. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was Mike. You're not going to believe what I found, he said without preamble. Your guy Victor Reese, the Harvard MBA and finance whiz, he doesn't exist. What do you mean? I mean Victor Reese is a ghost. The real Victor Reese died 15 years ago at age 7 in a car accident in Oregon. Someone's been using his identity, and they've done a damn good job of it. Social security number, credit history, the works. But dig deep enough and there's nothing solid before about 10 years ago. Olivia's heart raced. Can you prove it? Got the death certificate right here. And I've been comparing photos from your Victor Reese's social media to age progression software using the dead kid's pictures. No match, your guy's an imposter. I need everything you have, Olivia said. And Mike? This stays between us for now. Always does, Judge. I'll bring the file to you tomorrow morning. As she drove home through the darkening streets, Olivia felt a strange mix of vindication and dread. Tom had been telling the truth, at least about Victor Reese not being who he claimed to be. But now what? She couldn't exactly burst into court with illegally obtained evidence about a case she'd recused herself from. She needed a plan, a way to get this information to the right people without implicating herself or Mike. The justice system had safeguards for a reason, to prevent exactly this kind of personal involvement in cases. But the system was failing here and she couldn't stand by and watch. By the time she pulled into her driveway, Olivia had made her decision. Tomorrow she would find a way to get the truth out. Not as Judge Reed, bound by ethical constraints, but as Olivia, who still believed that justice and truth mattered more than rules and procedures. The risks were enormous. Her career, her reputation, everything she'd worked for could be jeopardized. But as she thought of Tom sitting in a jail cell, taking the fall for someone else's crimes, she knew she had no choice. Some lines were worth crossing, some rules worth breaking, especially when the alternative was letting an innocent man lose everything. Morning came too quickly. Olivia had barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities and consequences. By 6 a.m. she was already at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers, Nancy's documents, notes from her conversation with Tom, and her own scribbled thoughts on how to proceed. Her doorbell rang at exactly 7. Mike stood on her porch holding a thick manila envelope and 2 coffee cups. Thought you might need this, he said, handing her one of the cups. You look like you've had a rough night. Thanks, she replied, taking a grateful sip. Come in. They sat at her kitchen table and Mike spread out his findings. Birth certificate for the real Victor Reese, death certificate from 15 years ago, and a stack of documents showing how someone had gradually built up the false identity over the past decade. This is impressive work, Olivia said, flipping through the papers. How did you get all this so quickly? Mike shrugged. I have connections at the vital records offices in several states. And I called in a favor from a buddy at the FBI, off the record, of course. Of course, Olivia murmured, knowing better than to ask for details. There's more, Mike said, pulling out a tablet. I ran facial recognition on some photos of your Victor Reese, got a hit. He tapped the screen, bringing up 2 photos side by side. Victor Reese in a business suit at a charity gala, and a mug shot of a younger man with different hair but unmistakably the same face. Meet Richard Cooper, Mike said. Arrested 12 years ago for securities fraud in Connecticut. Served 4 years, then disappeared. Changed his name, his look, even had some work done on his face, but the recognition software doesn't lie. Olivia stared at the photos. So he's done this before. Looks that way. And if his pattern holds, he's probably already left the country with everyone's money. Olivia thought of Tom sitting in jail while the real criminal was likely on a beach somewhere. I need to get this to Tom's lawyer. Mike's expression grew serious. Olivia, you know how this works. I got this information through unofficial channels. It wouldn't be admissible in court. I know, she said, but it gives the defense something to work with. They can request official records, get warrants, do it all by the book now that they know what to look for. And how do you explain how they suddenly knew where to look? It was the question she'd been wrestling with all night. I'm still figuring that out. After Mike left, Olivia drove to the courthouse, her mind still spinning. Tom's bail hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. in Judge Henderson's courtroom. She couldn't attend. It would raise too many eyebrows, but she could still find a way to get the information to Tom's attorney. In her office, she reviewed her own court schedule for the day. 2 hearings in the morning, a lunch meeting with the other county judges, then 3 more cases in the afternoon. No obvious windows to make a move. As she prepared for her first case, her clerk knocked on the door. Judge Reed? There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Who is it? Mr. Lewis. Says he's Thomas Fuller's attorney. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Send him in. David Lewis was younger than she expected, probably in his mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a serious demeanor. He closed the door behind him and spoke without preamble. Judge Reed, I apologize for the intrusion, but I needed to speak with you before my client's bail hearing. Mr. Lewis, you know I've recused myself from that case. We shouldn't be discussing it, he nodded. Under normal circumstances, I would agree. But these aren't normal circumstances. A witness came to me yesterday, Nancy Winters. She told me you have evidence of potential forgery. Olivia kept her expression neutral. Mrs. Winters shouldn't have involved me. As I told her, I can't get involved in Mr. Fuller's case. With all due respect, Your Honor, you already are involved. Lewis leaned forward. I know about your history with my client. I know you visited him in jail. And I know Mrs. Winters gave you documents suggesting evidence tampering. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Olivia asked, What do you want from me, Mr. Lewis? The truth, he said simply. If you have evidence that could help my client, I need it. I'm fighting an uphill battle here. The prosecutor has painted Thomas Fuller as a greedy con man who stole from trusting clients. The judge is leaning toward denying bail, and the real criminal is probably halfway around the world by now. Olivia's eyes narrowed. What makes you say that? Lewis sighed. Because I've been doing some digging of my own. Victor Reese's name is on all the paperwork, but when I try to find him for a deposition, he's mysteriously unavailable. His home was cleared out 2 days before my client was arrested. His phones are disconnected. It doesn't take a genius to see what happened here. Olivia made a decision. Opening her drawer, she took out a blank thumb drive she kept for court exhibits. She copied the files from Mike's envelope. Not his notes or anything showing how he'd obtained the information, just the raw documents showing Victor Reese's true identity. I can't tell you where this came from, she said, handing him the drive. And I can't be connected to it in any way. But if you look into a man named Richard Cooper and his connection to Victor Reese, you might find something useful for your case. Lewis took the drive, his expression a mix of gratitude and concern. You're risking a lot, Judge Reed. I'm risking everything, she corrected him. But I believe in justice more than I believe in rules. Just be smart about how you use this information. Find legitimate ways to request the same documents. Build your case properly. After Lewis left, Olivia felt both relieved and terrified. She'd crossed a line, no question. If anyone discovered what she'd done, her career would be over. But the alternative, letting Tom take the fall for someone else's crimes, was unthinkable. Her morning hearings went by in a blur. During a brief recess, she checked the court schedule and saw that Tom's bail hearing had been moved to the afternoon. Unusual but not unheard of. She wondered if Lewis was already putting the new information to use. At lunch, she sat with the other county judges, including Frank Henderson. He looked troubled. Everything okay, Frank? She asked when they had a moment alone. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Had an interesting development in the Fuller case this morning. Defense attorney came in with a request to postpone the bail hearing. Says he has new evidence suggesting another party might be responsible for the fraud. Olivia kept her face carefully blank. That happens sometimes. New evidence comes to light. Yes, but this is unusual. He's specifically asking for a warrant to investigate the business partner, a man named Victor Reese, claiming he has reason to believe Reese is actually using a stolen identity. Even gave the name of the real person he thinks Reese might be. Interesting, Olivia said, her heart pounding. Are you going to grant the warrant? Frank nodded slowly. Already did. Something about the attorney's request seemed solid. And frankly, I'd been wondering about this Reese character myself after our conversation yesterday. He gave her a pointed look. I don't suppose you know anything about this sudden development. How could I? She said, meeting his gaze steadily. I've recused myself from the case. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Of course. Well, we'll see what the warrant turns up. If this Reese is really who the defense claims he is, it could change everything. Back in her courtroom, Olivia found it hard to focus on the cases before her. Her mind kept drifting to Tom's situation. Had she done enough, too much? The right thing for the wrong reasons, or the wrong thing for the right ones? At 4 o'clock, her clerk handed her a note. Bail granted for Thomas Fuller. Released on $50,000 bond. Relief washed over her. At least Tom wouldn't be sitting in jail while the truth came to light. It was a small victory, but an important one. As she was leaving the courthouse that evening, she spotted Tom walking down the front steps with his attorney. He looked exhausted but free, his shoulders straighter than they had been in the jail visiting room. Their eyes met briefly across the courthouse lawn. He gave a small nod of gratitude and she returned it before turning away. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Same place as before, 8 p.m. It had to be Lewis. She texted back a simple, okay. At home, she changed into casual clothes and tried to eat something, but her appetite was gone. The weight of what she'd done, interfering in a case, sharing illegally obtained information, pressed on her. Yet she couldn't bring herself to regret it, not when it meant an innocent man was out of jail. At 8, she drove back to the courthouse parking lot, now mostly empty. Lewis was waiting in his car, and Tom was in the passenger seat. They both got out when she arrived. Thank you, Tom said simply, his eyes full of emotion. David told me what you did. I didn't do anything that won't need to be done properly through official channels, she replied carefully. Lewis nodded. We're already on it. The warrant came through this afternoon. Police searched Reese's last known address and found evidence he'd left the country. They also found shredded documents we're piecing together. Looks like he was systematically forging signatures and creating false investment records. Prosecutor doesn't want to admit she charged the wrong person, Tom added. But the evidence is mounting. 3 more clients have come forward with documentation showing their signatures were forged. That's good, Olivia said. That's how it should work. The evidence speaks for itself. But we wouldn't have known where to look without your help, Lewis said quietly. You took a huge risk, Judge Reed. She shook her head. No one can know about my involvement, not ever. For all anyone knows, Mrs. Winters came to you directly, and you did your own investigation into Reese. That's the official story, Lewis agreed. But the 3 of us will always know the truth. As she drove home later, Olivia felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. She'd bent the rules, perhaps even broken them. Her actions wouldn't hold up to ethical scrutiny. But an innocent man was free and the real criminal would eventually face justice. Sometimes, she reflected, doing the right thing meant coloring outside the lines. The law was a human creation, imperfect and rigid. Justice, on the other hand, was a principle, flexible, nuanced, and ultimately more important. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The case against Tom wasn't dropped yet, just weakened. The prosecutor would fight back. But for tonight at least, Olivia could sleep knowing she'd followed her conscience, whatever the cost might be. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of developments. Olivia kept her distance from Tom's case, watching from afar as the story unfolded in courthouse corridors and local news reports. The prosecutor, a tough-minded woman named Diane Powell, initially fought hard to maintain the charges against Tom, insisting that he and Victor Reese had worked together in the scheme. But the evidence against Reese mounted daily. The FBI joined the investigation after Lewis presented the court with documentation showing Reese's true identity as Richard Cooper, a convicted fraudster. International authorities confirmed that a man matching Cooper's description had entered Singapore 3 days before Tom's arrest. Bank records revealed offshore accounts in Cooper's name, containing millions in stolen investor funds. Olivia maintained her usual routine, hearing cases and writing opinions as if nothing had changed. But internally she felt a constant tension. Had she done the right thing? Had she compromised her judicial integrity beyond repair? These questions followed her through sleepless nights and distracted days. On a rainy Tuesday morning, her clerk knocked on her office door. "Judge Reed? The district attorney is here to see you." Olivia's stomach tightened. Richard Parker, the county's DA, rarely made personal visits to judges' chambers. "Send him in." Parker entered, his expression unreadable. In his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for political ambition, he wasn't someone Olivia particularly trusted. "Richard," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "What brings you by?" He sat down, folding his hands in his lap. "I wanted to discuss the Fuller case with you." Olivia kept her face carefully neutral. "I've recused myself from that case, as you know." "Yes," he said slowly. "That's part of what I wanted to discuss." The silence stretched between them as Olivia waited for him to continue. Her heart pounded, but she kept her breathing steady. "We're dropping all charges against Fuller," Parker finally said. "The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Relief flooded through her, but she kept her expression professional. "I see. That seems appropriate given the evidence about Reese, or Cooper, rather." Parker nodded. "The FBI has solid proof he orchestrated the entire scheme. Fuller appears to have been exactly what he claimed, an unwitting partner whose name and reputation were used to lure investors." "Justice served." "Then?" Olivia said cautiously. "Perhaps." Parker leaned forward. "But there's another matter, Olivia. The timing of the defense's sudden insights about Cooper's true identity seems convenient, almost as if someone with inside knowledge pointed them in the right direction." Olivia met his gaze evenly. "Good defense attorneys follow every lead. That's their job." "True," he conceded. "But in this case, the lead appeared quite suddenly, right after you recused yourself. Right after you visited Fuller in jail, in fact." Her blood ran cold. "Are you accusing me of something, Richard?" He held up his hands. "Not accusing. Wondering. If a judge were to provide information to the defense, even information that ultimately proved true, it would represent a serious breach of judicial ethics." "It would," she agreed, "if that had happened." Parker studied her for a long moment. "The thing is, Olivia, no one can quite figure out how Lewis knew to look into Cooper's background. The defense isn't talking, of course. Client privilege and all that. Perhaps one of the victims made the connection," she suggested. "Several of them believed Fuller was innocent from the start." "Perhaps." Parker didn't sound convinced. "In any case, it's a moot point now. Fuller is innocent, Cooper is guilty, and we're pursuing extradition. The system worked, even if the path was unusual." After he left, Olivia sat motionless, trying to process what had just happened. Was that a warning, a threat, or simply Parker covering his bases before the case officially collapsed? She was still mulling it over when her phone rang. It was Lisa from the public defender's office. "Have you heard?" Lisa asked without preamble. "They're dropping all charges against Fuller. And get this, the prosecutor, Diane Powell, just submitted her resignation. Word is she's taking the fall for rushing to judgment and ignoring evidence that pointed to Reese early on." "That seems harsh," Olivia said. Powell was a career prosecutor with a solid reputation. "Politics," Lisa replied. "Parker needs a scapegoat. Can't have the public thinking his office nearly sent an innocent man to prison, while the real criminal escaped with millions. Better to blame an overzealous prosecutor." After they hung up, Olivia felt a new weight settle on her shoulders. She'd helped free an innocent man, yes, but her actions had also contributed to a good prosecutor losing her job. The ripple effects of justice and injustice were never simple. That evening, as she walked to her car, Tom was waiting in the parking lot. He looked different already. The strain of the past weeks had aged him, but there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I heard the news," she said, approaching cautiously. "Congratulations." "Thank you." His voice was thick with emotion. "Not just for the congratulations. For everything." She glanced around the empty lot. "We shouldn't be seen together, Tom, not yet. There are still questions about how your attorney knew where to look for evidence. I know, he said. I'll keep this brief. I just wanted to tell you that they found most of the money. Cooper had it in those offshore accounts. They're going to be able to return a substantial portion to the investors. That's wonderful news. There's more, he continued. Nancy Winters and some of the other clients who believed in me. They want me to help reorganize what's left of the firm, start fresh with complete transparency. They still trust me, Olivia. After everything that happened, she smiled, genuinely happy for him. You always were trustworthy, Tom. Even as a kid. His expression grew serious. Did you risk your career because you remembered that boy? Or because the evidence convinced you? It was a question she'd asked herself countless times. Both, I suppose. The memory made me look closer. The evidence made me act, he nodded. I'm leaving town for a while. Going to visit my kids, try to rebuild that relationship. But I'll be back, and when the dust settles, I'd like to catch up properly. As old friends, not as a judge and a defendant. I'd like that, she said softly. After Tom left, Olivia drove home through the quiet streets of the town she'd made her own. The ethical lines she'd crossed still troubled her. She'd taken an oath to uphold the law impartially, without favor or bias. She'd broken that oath, however noble her intentions. Yet as she pulled into her driveway, she couldn't bring herself to regret what she'd done. The system wasn't perfect. Sometimes it needed a nudge in the right direction. As long as the truth ultimately prevailed, wasn't that what mattered most? 6 months later, Olivia sat in a small cafe downtown, waiting for Tom to arrive. He'd been true to his word, spending time with his children before returning to rebuild his life and business in Pine Creek County. They'd spoken briefly by phone a few times, but this was their first real meeting since the case ended. She spotted him through the window, walking with a confidence that had been absent when she first saw him in her courtroom. When he entered and saw her, his face lit up with a smile that transported her back to their childhood, climbing trees, sharing secrets, navigating the complexities of growing up together. Judge Reed, he said with a teasing formality as he sat down across from her. Mr. Fuller, she replied in kind, though I think we can drop the titles now. As they caught up over coffee, Olivia felt the last lingering doubts about her actions fade away. Tom was rebuilding his investors' trust, making amends for his failure to spot Cooper's deception earlier. 3/4 of the stolen money had been recovered and returned. The FBI had tracked Cooper to Indonesia and was negotiating extradition. Justice, albeit delayed and imperfect, had been served. I never asked you, Tom said as they finished their coffee. What made you become a judge? Olivia considered the question. I believe in the law, in its power to protect people, to create order from chaos. But I also believe in looking beyond the letter of the law to its spirit. That's what a good judge does, balances rules with wisdom. Even when that means bending the rules? His eyes held no judgment, only curiosity. Especially then, she admitted. The perfect application of an imperfect law can sometimes be the greatest injustice of all. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Tom held out his hand. She took it, feeling the connection of their shared past and the new bond forged through their recent ordeal. Friends again? He asked. We never stopped being friends, she replied. We just took a 25-year intermission. Walking back to her car, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace. Her career had survived. Parker's insinuations had never materialized into formal accusations. Her conscience was clear, and an old friendship had been renewed, tempered by time and trial into something deeper. The choices we make in difficult moments, she reflected, reveal more about us than all our carefully considered decisions. When faced with the choice between strict adherence to rules and the messy pursuit of true justice, she'd chosen justice. It wasn't the easiest path or the safest, but standing here now in the warmth of the afternoon sun with the weight of doubt finally lifted from her shoulders, she knew it had been the right one.